Hey y'all, remember a few years ago when I made that dumb Skyrim as the Lone Wanderer video? You know, the one with the power armor and access to guns? Well, what if part of that ridiculous scenario was now something you could do somewhat legitimately and even kinda lore friendly? Well, as it just so happens, thanks to weaponizing the 3 digits on the back of my MasterCard, Bethesda have allowed me to do just that. Disclaimer, Nerbit did not actually spend money on this, but rather he found he randomly had over 2,000 Creation Club V-Bucks in the account that he had zero recollection of purchasing, seeing as the only other items he'd ever bought from this service was the Iron Helmet and Doom Marine sets for Fallout 4. I highly encourage all of you to check your own accounts on the off chance that you've been gifted free credits as well. If we want to get technical, it's actually an arquebus, but I'm just going to refer to it as a gun for the majority of the run. As one might expect, it's more than likely going to pack quite a punch, given that nobody in Tamriel has seen anything of this like since the dwarves were kicking around, and they were not known to share their knowledge. Rules are rather straightforward. I can only fight with the gun, so like usual, I'll need to find a way to get to the weapon without attacking anything, which should hopefully be simple enough. Now with all that out of the way, let's begin. Within seconds of starting, the run is already blessed by God Hard, as the initial loading screen shows the gun itself. Weird side note, my game may have actually bugged out as every single loading screen from this point forward was only showing the gun. Alrighty, character creation. As it is a ranged weapon and I want to have the best start imaginable, of course I will want to go with a wood elf as they start with the highest archery skill out of the races. Makes sense, right? Yes. However, being a lizard with a gun and the 1,000-yard PTSD stare is infinitely more hilarious, so shoots many bullets wins the popularity contest this time around. We all know how this goes. We hear some growls, watch some decapitations, and before long we are running for our lives from either Thomas the Tank Engine or Randy Savage. With no firepower to my name, I follow Hrothgar into the keep, simply because doing so is faster, as once he cuts your binds, you can just grab the key that unlocks the nearby gates, meaning, unlike when you follow Ralof, you don't actually have to just wait around for him to take out the guards. Personally, I think that the Argonians should be able to use their tail as a one-time lockpick to unlock the gate, but that's just me. Well, while Hrothgar is more than likely getting slaughtered by the overwhelming storm coming his way, I slip on by every man, spider, and bear until I can make it back outside. I grab the Thief Stone on my way to Riverwood for faster archery XP, as despite every other instance of archery being classified as a warrior skill, it is still under the Thief Stone for whatever reason. Let's say intentional bug or something. At Riverwood, I sell just about everything I grabbed in Helgen, which, to be honest, wasn't a lot. I was more focused on not getting skinned alive, to be fair. Now, on to actually getting the weapon. Well, you can't just buy it like everything else, nor can you find it randomly in containers or on enemies. Rather, there is a unique new quest just for this creation. It starts with us heading to a new Dwemer ruin that has seemingly popped out of nowhere, just a little bit north of the Valtheim Towers where I like to bully some bandits on the regular. Arriving at Thumbawumpin or whatever, I head on in, and for the most part it's your run-of-the-mill dwarven ruin. You have some robots, some water, death, locked containers, you know, the works. I was initially worried about how to deal with the Thalmor, as there is a small camp of theirs near the end of the first part of the dungeon, but to my surprise, they never seem to spawn in. I'm gonna chalk this up to me being underleveled, and therefore the enemy scaling may have just messed up entirely and not spawned them at all. My first death happened right after this, to be fair, in which I came face to face with one of the new Dwemer constructs who was outfitted with a gun. I was, of course, not prepared for that. Second attempt and I just ignore the bot by rushing straight for the elevator in the center. In a somewhat unique sequence, as you gotta take them where you can get them, you're suddenly hit with a core memory from Halo Reach as you descend with the lift. The enemies spawn indefinitely here as it's just a time-based event, which actually works out super well for us, because that means we only need to deal with the one spider, who we can very easily kite around the lever until the game decides we have bullied him enough for one lifetime. The lift crashing to the bottom and the sudden influx of water would be a more terrifying sight if my guy didn't have gills that he could switch on and off at a moment's notice. After skinny dipping for a bit, we finally come across our first usable weapon, and it's just kinda sitting out in the open. I'm not gonna complain, mind you, I'd rather it was this way rather than me spending 20 minutes off screen trying to find a needle in a haystack. It already has a damage of 29, not counting whatever ammo type we shove into it, so it should be clear from the get-go here that this is more than likely going to be an absurdly powerful weapon. Again, it is a gun. Oh, and it also ignores 50% of a target's armor, FYI. Just thought I'd toss that one out there. Next to the weapon is a bunch of overloaded ammo for it, which is just a faster and stronger variant of the normal bullets we'll be using. Speaking of using the weapon, how does it function? Well, everybody who was annoyed by the last gun mod just being a reskinned staff can rejoice, as the arquebus is instead a reskinned crossbow. I feel like most people saw that coming. The balls it fires are less bullet-like and more akin to explosive cannonballs, if I'm honest. It feels fairly similar to using the broadsider in Fallout 4 if I was to compare it to anything. I should make a dedicated run on that one day. Anyway, back to the video on your screens. As expected, it hits with the force of 1,000 suns. Or at least it more than likely will, once I fight enemies closer to my own level. After all, I am still only level 1, and the recommended level for this quest from the mod author was 10. Still, the stupidly high damage allows me to level the playing field, and as a result, stands some semblance of a chance against the golden guns blocking my path to the exit. During my unbridled slaughter of anything yellow, I made the wonderful discovery that you can indeed sharpen the gun for extra damage. Because why wouldn't you be able to? On the topic of making the strong stronger, my luck shines through and against all odds, find an iron helmet of archery, which of course gives the arquebus a nice little damage boost that it really did not need. After an encounter with 2 more Dwemer that was honestly tougher than it had any right to be, I partake in a small puzzle, which is always appreciated, before making my way to the final room of the ruins, which naturally has some rewards for me in it to hit me with that dopamine high, as well as a boss battle. Before fighting said boss, one of the treasures we find is a unique arquebus called Atgeir. It has an extra R as to make it stand out from the Norse weapon. Not that there are halberds in Skyrim, but I digress. Basically, it just does more damage, as well as coming with a sleight of hand perk from Call of Duty. It's a good thing too, as the big cheese centurion pops out and begins making my life miserable. I am smart enough to save levels for free heals in scenarios like this, along with the Argonian's Hist skin power, but even still, they only delay the inevitable more often than not. Given its sheer size and girth, you can ascertain correctly that he pummeled the shit out of me repeatedly. Fortunately, the best strategy to winning a gunfight is to simply place yourself outside of your opponent's effective range and then just pelt them with firepower until they stop moving. Sure enough, that works wonders. The treasure room contains a few more goodies for me to procure, one of which is a Dwemer arquebus, which, I mean, it seems just a little bit odd to let me have that now, seeing how I've already got this unique one here that does just more damage anyway. Thankfully, there is one other thing here, which is the most important reward of all, the schematics to build more guns of varying tiers and the ability to craft ammo. The last one is damn near essential, as nobody, from my knowledge, sells ammunition for the arquebus, so crafting it is the only way you're getting any further use out of the weapon once you run out of the very limited ammo supply found in this ruin. Now that my adventure is done, I can thankfully leave via the convenient lift nearby, which spits me out near Iverstead. The gate was locked and could only be opened from my side, but I'm sure if you had a wooden plate, you could probably just bypass it from the exit and just skip the entire dungeon if you wanted to, assuming all you wanted was the unique rifle and schematics after all. I sell all of the loot I gathered that wasn't the legendary gun or its ammo, and then I set off to craft some of the ammo myself. And let me tell you, it's quite the long process. Alright, well technically it doesn't really require much from the player, but you will be sitting around waiting for the vast majority of the time. Let me explain. So, to craft the arquebus balls, you need 1 iron and 2 black powder per ball. Alright, iron's easy enough, but what is black powder? Well, it's a new resource that can be crafted at a smelter. You can only craft it in bundles of 38 for some reason, and to make it, you need 8 pieces of charcoal. Alright, so rather than buying charcoal, you can craft it as well now. A single piece of charcoal requires 4 pieces of firewood. And now you're beginning to see where the true time investment of this run is. Well, luckily there is a woodcutter's block just outside of Belethor's store, so we don't have to travel too far. The only real problem is, unlike say, mining stone or clay for your house in Hearthfire, your Dragonborn won't just cut the wood indefinitely until you tell him to stop. Rather, he automatically stops the action after cutting about 3 or 4 pieces of wood in half. This means you cannot just have him go full lumberjack while you go and do something more interesting like your taxes or watch paint dry. I also nearly forgot to mention you will also require fire salts for each batch of 38 powder. Now, this one's not so bad, it's just a matter of checking the alchemists and crossing your fingers. If they don't have any, simply wait a few days and try again. Now, look, I am quite patient, but I'm also human, and if the option is there for me to speed this monotonous process along even slightly, I am going to take it. So I indulge in a small yet well-known glitch that lets you instantly restock/refresh a merchant's inventory. Simply check your merchant of choice for the fire salts, buy them if they are there, and then back out once you're done. Then quick save the game, attack or kill the merchant in question, reload said quick save, and just like that their stock is updated. For some reason. One day, right before the heat death of the universe, we will figure out just exactly how these games work. With all of this, it takes a little over 20 minutes to make around 80 balls. Hopefully more than enough for now, but with this being my only weapon, I honestly do not see them lasting very long. Sure, they'll one-shot, but that's still one shot per person. Also, the time it takes is mostly down to chance anyway. There's no guarantee that those fire assaults are going to spawn after all, so trying to get enough of them may end up taking longer than the brain-melting wood chopping. The only saving grace is that the salts should become more common as we level up, and the game starts to give us access to higher tier ingredients more frequently. Now, according to the mod's description, it does tie into the Civil War questline, so I figured I would hit that up now before I no doubt breeze through the main quest. Given that I helped Hrothgar and Helgen, you would assume I'm siding with the Legion today. Well, you are wrong. I sided with them last time, so it's Ulfric and the boys today. Plus, it was incredibly funny how angry people got when my Dark Elf joined the rebels, so I'm curious if that happens again now that I'm a big lizard. Talking with Colonel Campbell, and there's no difference yet, as like normal, I'm sent off towards the Serpent Stone to kill an ice wraith. The journey there had a few enemies, mainly Horkers, but it's still target practice nonetheless. I even got jumped by a vampire fledgling on the way. They didn't stand a chance, mind you, but an attempt was made on their part. To be honest, all this really did was make me realize how much more effective Lincoln would have been if he had access to this when I recorded the run, but oh well, how was I supposed to know that Skyrim would still be getting updates nearly 13 years after its initial release? Granted, I probably should have noticed the signs. When I make it to the stone, as you might have predicted, the firepower melts the ice wraith until he is indistinguishable from the white blanket that covers most of Skyrim. Returning to Galmar, and it only now dawns on me that I don't even need to present him with any sort of proof. Like, not its teeth, or even some of its remaining goo I managed to scrape into a bottle. He just slaps me on the shoulders and goes, "Good job, bucko, now swear your loyalty." Once that's over with, it's immediately onto my first assignment, which is of course retrieving what sounds like the most uncomfortable piece of headwear in existence. Much like the trip to the stone, there was only one encounter worth talking about on the way to the crown. Another hopeful young murderer intent on bleeding me dry, only to be faced with a crushing realization that gunpowder outplays the sword. Also, hitting them with 2 direct shots did this to their corpse, so clearly there are other forces at play here inside the gun. Do I really need to go over how woefully unprepared the Imperials in and around the ruins were for me? Because I don't think I do. The only downside to the Civil War questline is the sheer amount of people you tend to fight in any given mission is going to cause me to run through my ammo in no time. On the bright side though, about halfway through the dungeon, the Imperials are replaced with Draugr. This is good because since the arquebus is a reskinned crossbow, this means, just like the crossbow, you can perform death blows on Draugr if you're within melee range and your next shot will be a guaranteed kill. I also feel like this may come as a shock to most, but yes, you can melee death blow people with the crossbow like this in vanilla Skyrim. Most people may not have seen this before because for some reason the crossbows only have this animation when fighting Draugr, plus if you're using the crossbow in the first place, chances are you're not within slapping distance of your enemies. As death blows only really occur when there's a single enemy left, it's not a foolproof way to get past an army of Draugr, but you know, every shot counts so I shouldn't complain. After all this, in the end I just shoot the Draugr Scourge anyway and take the crown. Giving the crown to the one true High King starts the next phase of the quest, taking Whiterun. Before I can be a good post boy and deliver the axe, I am stopped by the protagonist of New Vegas, who hands me a note from Galmar. No idea why he couldn't just talk to me as we were just in the same room, but whatever. This is where the arquebus creation plays into the Civil War. Basically, Galmar's asking me to check out the Dwemer ruins I've already been to, so I suppose this is how you're supposed to find the thing if you don't already have prior knowledge of its location. Well, seeing how I'm so ahead of the curve, I do a 180 and hand Galmar the schematics, which should make for quite the turning point in the war now that the Stormcloaks, and only the Stormcloaks, have the know-how on how to construct guns. Back on track, if I try to deliver Ulfric's axe to Balgruuf now, he won't give me an answer as he wants to deal with the dragon situation first. Makes sense, I suppose. So I take the initiative and take a brief jaunt through Bleak Falls Barrow to retrieve the stone. No points for guessing how all that played out. When that's over with, like I am almost compelled to, I return the Golden Claw to Lucan, as well as selling any loot I managed to find. Coming back to Riverwood was a good move, as Alvor was selling some leather bracers of minor archery, so that's another 15% damage increase right there. All in all, the weapon now does 81 damage. Goes without saying, you're not really supposed to have anything this powerful this early on, especially before the first dragon fight. Speaking of that encounter, after my excursion through Bleak Falls, I'm down to under 20 balls, so once more it was time to transform into an ammo press. This time I had just the worst luck trying to find fire salts. Took nearly 40 minutes to even get a decent supply of them. I even travelled around and tried every other alchemist, but that didn't seem to improve the odds that much. Alright, so during this, remember how I gave Galmar those schematics? Well, while I was in Solitude, I was approached by a courier. He hands me a gun, along with 48 overloaded balls and a note. The note explains that the gun I was just given was specifically created for me by order of Ulfric. This one, once again, does even more damage than the unique one I got in the ruins, as well as more effects on top of the fact it already ignores 50% of a target's armor. When fired, it can cause nearby targets to flee, as well as detecting life while I'm holding down the trigger. The weapon itself, despite what the little bar may indicate, does not need to be recharged, hence why I called it an effect and not an enchantment. Rather, while aiming, the detect life will come into effect and slowly begin draining my magicka. Honestly, I think that's kinda neat and wish more weapons had effects like this. At any rate, now that I have a new toy, I eagerly approach Bulgriff and jump for joy at the news of the dragon. As one might imagine, the dragon was about to bite off more than he could chew. This was rather evident by the fact of just how few balls it took to permanently put him down.
6 bullets, more than enough to kill anything that moves.
Well, we did it, we saved the city. For a grand total of 2 minutes, before me and Galmar come marching right back over the horizon, in with some catapults and an army of angry blonde men. Yeah, I can dig this. Viva la révolution, je suis un ouf. Well, props to them for sending out their own raging blondie. It didn't amount to much due to the whole ignoring armor thing, but good effort nonetheless. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before, the game glitched the hell out and nearly broke me along with its Civil War questline. This seems to be a common bug, as it's definitely not the first time this has happened to me, but after the quest wraps up and Galmar himself tells me to report to Ulfric, I can in fact not report to Ulfric, as he continues to act like I should be heading off to Whiterun for the attack. To cut a very long story incredibly short, I spent a very long time trying to fix this to no avail, but thanks to Skyrim bugs being as notorious as they are, I was eventually able to find many different workarounds for this issue from other unfortunate players. So basically, it was just a checklist of trying them all out until something managed to get the questline back on track. One involved walking from Dragon's Reach to Windhelm without fast travelling. That one did not work. Someone suggested waiting 3 days to a week like you would to refresh a shop. That one did not work. Another insisted on simply brute forcing Ulfric with dialogue and then reloading until he acknowledged our potential war crimes. That also did not work. In the end, what fixed it was fast travelling to Riverwood, then to Whiterun, and then back to Riverwood again. I do not know why, someone said it worked for them, so I tried it, and sure enough, it did in fact work. Sweet Jesus, these games, man. Also, there was just a shit ton of Stormcloaks chilling together outside of Dragon's Reach. It's not important at all, but it felt like the most amount of people I've ever seen in one enclosed space in Skyrim without the game's framerate immediately tanking. Anyway, it's ammo making time, and to save the repetition of it all, still no fire salts! At this point, I said to hell with it and began travelling north. Not just to walk into the ocean, as again, gills, but rather to knock down the door of Septimus's igloo, demand he hands me the Allspark, and more importantly, steal the handful of fire salts he has on display. These, combined with more trial, murder and error, eventually result in 115 balls of pure death. From here, I began really just focusing on the Civil War quest. Initially, I was quite excited for this, as the way that I read it, getting the arquebus early would affect this chain of quests, but other than that single instance of the note and gun from the courier, it did not. I was hoping that even during some of the fort assaults, or hell, even the final attack on Solitude, because I handed the schematics over to the army's second in command, that some of the Stormcloaks would be packing heat, but again, not the case. So with not much different, and me with a weapon doing about 100 damage per shot, i.e. insta-kills, it figures I just speed through the rest of the war. After all, from this point, it basically just goes Fort Cart, Fort Murder Dragon, Fort City. During this, I smacked a few people with a gun, and just like in the bow bashing video, it is possible to do the sheathing glitch to make your bashes do the same damage as your weapon's base damage. Anyway, the battle with Tullius is, as always, underwhelming, and then I just execute him via one-man firing squad. Rather than head for the Greybeards, I figured I may as well make use of this cube and grab the Elder Scroll now. Except, I really did not feel like tracking down more Dwemer ruins. Honestly, wasting almost all of my ammo on Thalmor just didn't sound ideal, so to circumvent that, I just used a nearby plate in this elevator, along with a sprinkle of sprinting, to easily clip on through and skip like 90% of the dungeon. This seems to completely break the AI of Sulla and Umana, not that they were much of a threat, but hey, if you're starting a fresh save and just want the Targe of the Blooded or a full set of steel plate minus the helmet, this is the way to do it. Some more blasting and some more dead fools, and just like that, we have the Elder Scroll. Go me. I then return the cube to Septimus because I'm nice like that, and then it's off to High Hrothgar. Being the hunter as opposed to the hunted with the troll is something that will always make me giddy. Long past are the days of 14-year-old Nerbit getting absolutely clotheslined by the abominable snowman. Reaching the screamers, and we run through the usual tests. Once we step outside for a bit, things get rather heated when some hired thugs appear seemingly out of nowhere to, and I quote, teach me a lesson. Well, I didn't even have to lift a finger because despite the Greybeards preaching things like peace and not wanting to pursue power, they absolutely wiped the floor with these common bandits. After the Greybeards have had their fun, I check the corpses, only to find they were sent by Septimus Cygnus. Alright, now he dies. Well, actually, he dies later. He has yet to send me a letter to allow me to start the devil worshipping side of his quest, so until then, he is essential. Pushing on with that being my new main goal, if I'm honest, I head on over to get the horn, which was a pleasant experience. Again, Draugr are more than welcome. The less time I have to spend chopping firewood, the better. Of course, this leads to Delphine and Dragon Fight number 2. I must stress that if Ulfric would just make use of the rifle schematics that I provided, he probably wouldn't need to worry about dragons as much. When we arrive at the dragon, I simply position myself into a flanking position for the almost guaranteed crits. A few of these bad boys right up the poop chute, and Salo Kinnear is ready to crawl right back into his freshly opened grave. Keeping the ball rolling, it's off to the embassy where I just shove everything I own into Malborn's pockets. This is because I seem to have a pretty bad short-term memory, as almost every time I do this, I end up forgetting to retrieve my items from Delphine. The embassy is oddly cathartic. It feels really good to see the normally stuck-up and pompous high elves run in fear as I effortlessly tear through their numbers. A ward is not going to stop gunpowder, I am afraid. It doesn't take too long to shoot up the place, but clearly the sheer amount of gunfire has spooked just about everyone, as not only did most of them not even return fire, but Malborn was so confused by the whole ordeal that he kept trying to murder the prisoner I was attempting to save. Fortunately, after our Benny Hill skit, we were able to find some common ground in murdering a nearby frost troll. I mean, it's not like I saw either of them again after this, so for all I know, Malborn tracked down the man and murdered him in his sleep with his tiny little elf hands. Regardless, not my problem, I had more elves to kill as it was off to Riften to continue bullying the Thalmor until I reached Esbern. Does it feel like I'm just flying through the latter half of this game? Well, it should. This thing is so absurdly busted by this stage that it feels like I've turned God mode on. I mean, what is weapon-based DLC nowadays if not monetized cheat codes after all? After returning the old man, it's off to Alduin's Wall. Like normal, the journey there has some more dragon encounters. We know how those go by now. But on a brighter note, Septimus has finally sent for me, and by proxy, signed his own death warrant. So I quickly mop up the Forsworn and minor blood ritual before forcing Esbern to recite the wall at gunpoint, and then heading back to old Septimus to see what the next part in his master plan is. I briefly mentioned the blood sacrifice a moment ago, and it seems like Septimus is also on a similar wavelength, as he has deduced the only way to get through the sealed door is to have me harvest blood from each of the elven races. It's easy enough, but of course when I go to leave, Tentacles is now here to slow the pace down to a crawl. He tells me to just continue following Septimus, only that afterwards I will be his champion, considering I'm doing all the work on Septimus' behalf, and honestly, yeah, that makes sense. As I have already gotten the Elder Scroll in the Dwarven Ruins, I figured I could easily get the Thalmor blood first. Well, turns out I'm an idiot and forgot to unlock the elevator. Fortunately, the plate is still here, so we just clip through once more. Rather than travel back down to Blackreach, I decide to just go in the opposite direction, as there are a few Thalmor inside this current room. Small problem though, as you are normally not meant to be able to enter from this side, there is no way to open the gate, so I cannot reach them. If I killed one close enough to the gate though, it should be more than okay. So I started trying to do that. You can probably already guess there's a problem with this, two in fact. First off, the gun is causing them to run in fear when I fire it, and secondly, when I do kill them with it, it tends to blast them a few feet away, which is not ideal. Well, in a weird turn of events, that proved to be advantageous, as I was able to shoot near their corpses to bounce them back towards me, just close enough that I could reach my hand through the gates and extract the goods. Next was Wood Elf, and again, I already had this one thought out in advance. Off screen earlier, I completed the Simp Triangle in favour of Faendal and Riverwood. So I simply returned to the village, asked for his assistance, and then lured him just far enough outside of town that his neighbours wouldn't hear his cries for help. 2 down, 3 to go. The last 3 were nothing special. I just travelled to Markarth, Solitude and Windhelm, and just killed the first Orc, High Elf and Dark Elf that I laid my eyes on. You see, I am rich by this point, so I can very easily just pay away the total 3,000 gold for my crimes and be no worse for wear. With that, I return to Septimus, he performs the rite to open the door, and is so flabbergasted by the sight of a book, he turns into dust. I, on the other hand, am in need of some quality reading material, and nothing screams good book, quite like one with a spine that may literally be constructed from bone.
Come, my champion.
I'd rather just keep the book, to be honest. I then read The Path of Shadow, immediately realised that did in fact not increase my archery skill, so I reloaded and went with The Path of Might instead. This pushes me to the stage where I can take the last major perk I want from the tree, that being the one that lets me move faster with the bow, or in this case, the gun, while aiming. It makes combat a tad faster, not that having to manoeuvre around is any real concern when your enemies tend to be dead before they even realise what's happening. So I meet back up with the Greybeards and blah blah blah, we learn the Dragon Wren shout and teach Alduin the true power of anti-air artillery. And what's worse, Alduin had a minor attention glitch that made this way easier than it already was. For whatever reason, even though I was clearly the bigger threat and actively doing most of the damage to him, he, for whatever reason, only attacked me twice before focusing all of his attention on Parthenax. This then allowed me to just gun him down in less than a minute. All that leaves is the final mission. With the hordes of monsters, the fact I am in some form of the afterlife, and the faster moving and shooting speed, it's like I'm playing a weird Doom bootleg. I killed everything in Skuldafn, not that it matters, and then proceeded to heaven. I found the remains of the High King while I was there, and decided to help finish what Ulfric started. I got the jump on Soon to help speed up the whole process, and then after meeting up with the 3 people who failed in doing their job last time, we head back out to put an end to Alduin, which, shocker, I basically do all by myself. It's no more difficult than the previous encounter, so yet again, Alduin is defeated, finishing the game and proving yes, you can indeed beat Skyrim with a gun. Wow, you can beat Skyrim with a literal firearm, who saw that one coming? It's weird to say, given that it's a single player game with so many exploits for increasing your damage output, that it's almost difficult to play the game in a way that doesn't make you absurdly overpowered. But I think it's safe to say, especially for the early to mid game, the arquebus is most definitely pay to win. Not a single thing ever stood a chance, except maybe some of the Dwemer robots inside the ruins where I found the thing. But even then, you saw how I was able to just mostly avoid them until I got the gun anyway, so what does it matter? Ammo is tedious to make, yes, but I'm also not going to pretend that you can't just duplicate it with the follower method. In fact, here is footage of me trying it after the fact, just to prove that it did indeed work. Anyway, next video is going to be a Fallout 3 run. Haven't played it since April last year, and it's a run I've been dying to get to for a while. And it being my favourite Fallout game, it kills me a little that I haven't made more runs for it. Regardless, that's going to be the end of this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like. If you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe as I try to run these videos out fairly frequently. My name's Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.